Frank, I want to start with your new trade targets board. A couple of defensemen popped up on there, and they are defensemen with term. Jamie Alexiak and Connor Murphy. Do you see either of those guys as potential fits in Edmonton?
I could see both of those guys, not together, but both of them being fits separately, yes. With Murphy, there's obviously the Stan Bowman connection, and I love the idea of taking his cap hit and knocking it in half. There's a reason why the Chicago Blackhawks didn't retain on Taylor Hall on his way to Carolina. They wanted to keep that last retained salary transaction slot, and it could be used on someone like Murphy. It could be used on someone like Seth Jones. The point is they've got options. They want to try and take advantage and juice a return. And you think back to the Jake McCabe deal going from Chicago to Toronto, that paid huge dividends. And I think making a deal like the Ekholm one a few years ago really underlines the power of trading for someone with term, because he fit like a glove. And then to be able to keep that continuity year over year, I think it really helps cement your status as a contender. And just look at the Vancouver Canucks and the peril that they've been in of late. They traded and made some enormous moves last season to bring in players that they didn't keep any of them, and then had to go out in the summer and find replacements for them, which we see now they have not adequately done, which is why when you sign Vinny Desharnais and Derek Forbort and then press Noah Juleson into more action, your team flounders in the standings as a result, because you just can't find the right mix and right pieces. And by that point, when the season starts, it's too late. So there is real value in trading for players with term, and I'd include Alexiak and the size and frame that he has as someone who's also a really good fit.
Yeah, the thing for me is if you don't have your first round pick in 2025, or if you want to trade it, then you have to move your 2026 first to Philly. The point is one of your next 2 first round picks has to go to Philly. So if you're going to trade the other one at this deadline, I think you need to be able to sit there next February and go, hey, we don't have a first to use at the deadline, but look at how complete our blue line looks with Nurse and this new guy and Ekholm and Bouchard and Kulak still under contract and Emberson still under contract. Like, if you're going to use that first, it can't be for a pure rental. It has to be with a guy you can still have in your lineup a year from now.
What does the package look like for a Murphy type?
Well, I think it starts with a first round pick, and then you're trying to add something else to it that makes it enticing. Like, at the end of the day, Murphy still has limitations, but what you're paying a premium for is really not just the term, but the fact that it'd be only $2 million a year. Like, that's where the real value seeps in, and you're paying extra for that retainment. So look, he's steady. He's not flashy. The one thing I really like about Murphy is that he does play a physical game and is not afraid to get in the mix. And I think some of that the Oilers could definitely use.
Yeah. Do you think then if the Oilers were to go out and, like you said, spend a first-round pick on a Murphy or an Alexiak, they would try and add like a depth piece as well, like they did with Adam Henrique last year where they got Sam Kerrick in a deal?
Yeah, and by the way, the Adam Henrique trade, I guess, kind of worked out fine. I think the mistake was probably in bringing him back. And look, we could probably diagnose or walk through the Oilers summer you guys touched on, and not even to go there on Broberg and Holloway, but just so many other facets of it that I think the big reason why they need to go out and get a depth piece is just the erosion of speed on this team's lineup. Missing McLeod, it's not from a production standpoint, it's from a skating standpoint. And, you know, still haven't had someone step up and really grab hold and take that 4C spot, which is why the Oilers were in the mix last week. And Stan Bowman, I think the night that he was at the University of Alberta Golden Bears game, was on the phone trying to potentially bring in someone like Drew O'Connor from Pittsburgh. So I think that's the thought process. It's not just depth. It's a very specific, we need more speed. And that part is what really stands out to me watching this team is they've got arguably the fastest player in the world, feet, hands, brain, all in unison. But a lot of their forward group is pretty slow.
My counterpoint to the McLeod thing and Henrique is you brought back Adam Henrique. I think with the logic of like, hey, we're not losing a ton here in terms of quality at 3C, and it allowed you to get Matt Savoie, and you desperately needed a decent prospect in this system because with the way Savoie's going in Bako, and we talked to Bruce Kurlock yesterday on the show.
Of speed, by the way, like that AHL speed skating competition, that looked good.
Yeah, so I think that swap, like you bring back Henrique and then you can swap McLeod for Savoie without really taking a lot away from your actual NHL roster. And now you have this prospect you can look at and be like, okay, some youth coming in next year.
I guess. And look, Savoie, and I've read all the Bruce Kurlock reports. He does look really promising, and that's good. And I love that he's been there sort of marinating, so to speak, in Bako. But still, I mean, it's not just Henrique. It's also Skinner, and it's also Arvidsson. Like, I think we're all still waiting for Arvidsson to pop because he really hasn't done anything this year.
Falling down a lot.
Then, we've spoke about this a lot on the show this week. Like, a top 6 winger might be something the others look at, right? Come the deadline, or a new scoring winger.
I think you're going to have to prioritize. Like, that's why this Klingberg signing could be so big, Liam. Is if he can be that top 4 right shot D, then you can potentially go after a top 6 guy. And then you also have to figure out what is the likelihood that Evander Kane can be that impact piece. Like, he might be in-house, he might be internal. If so, I think what that allows you to be is aggressive in trying to add at the best value proposition you can find. Regardless, like position agnostic. If you can add a quality middle 6 winger, if you can add another, impact defenseman, whether it's speed, whatever it might be, the chessboard becomes open for you to play if you have some degree of certainty that Kane and Klingberg are what you need them to be.
Yeah. We got a comment in here from McDoust who says, and our chat's buzzing with it, so I need to ask you. He says, perfect segue to Marchand, top 6 guy. Can you throw some cold water on that for me? Because I think the rumor's getting a little out of hand in oil country.
Yeah, I don't understand where some of these things come from. Like, I mean, as best I can tell, like the generation of this is like quite literally no different than all of the mock deals that we did on our show today, which is basically just like spit out anything you want, who says no, but because it kind of came in some like reporting fashion that somehow we need to address this, which, okay. I don't see the Boston Bruins trading Brad Marchand, period, full stop. Is there a place or a position where the Bruins get to this season and they feel like we're so far out of it and doesn't really make sense, as much as he's been a heart and soul guy, for us to re-sign Brad Marchand to buy the last few seasons of his career? Yeah, I could see that, but I don't think they're there yet. And beyond that, I don't really see him being a fit for the Oilers. Do you?
I think it's interesting because he would give you some jam, and you talked about adding more scoring. But the other side of it is like, again, you bring in these top 6 guys, and it kind of happened with Henrique. I'm not comparing the two, but like Henrique comes and everyone's underwhelmed at the production. And it's like, well, yeah, no shit. He's not going to score like he did in Anaheim because he doesn't get power play time here. And again, he's playing in a 3rd-line role. Marchand, I guess you would staple with one of McDavid or Draisaitl, so you'd get the 5-on-5 production, but the power play production goes away.
Well, that's what I was going to say, though. I think the biggest key for any trade deadline acquisition is setting proper expectations internally. I've said this all along. You can't go out and trade for Adam Henrique and think that he's going to be anything more than a 3C. That's not the thought process. That cannot be the thought process. I think the Vancouver Canucks are going to run into the same exact problem with Marcus Pettersson. You can go trade for Marcus Pettersson, but if you think he's going to come in and be a top-end defenseman for you, that's not the case. I know you know the player, but Marcus Pettersson is a 4-5. And I've taken a ton of heat for saying that of late, but that's the reality. That's what Marcus Pettersson has been paid to be. It's all those things. So if you think that you're going to find a guy and then elevate him and turn him into something that he's not, it's not going to happen.
Especially in the middle of the season, which is a total different, an added wrinkle to this.
Obviously, we got the news of the cap increasing over the next few years in the last couple of weeks, whenever it was. Do you think we could go into almost a super team era of the NHL?
Weird way to ask about ranting into the Oilers, but I respect it.
Do I think we could get to a super team era of the NHL? I think it's unlikely because we just had one of the super teams dismantle itself out of concern of paying those guys. And we see another team in Toronto who's at a crossroads with another one of its superstars. So I tend to think not, but if I were or someone else was an ultra aggressive GM, I would 100% be trying for it, because I do think that some teams have shown that there is a model of success there. Like, look at the way the Vegas Golden Knights manage their cap. They've got stars, no middle class, and grinders, or guys that are on low-level contracts that have perfectly outkicked their deal. The Colorado Avalanche won a cup with McKinnon, Makar, Rantanen, and yes, McKinnon was still on a value deal, so maybe that skews things. But the Tampa Bay Lightning, cap-wise, have been more constructed similar to the Vegas Golden Knights than other teams. So I do think there's a window of possibility, but I think because of the market conditions and the fact that every team is trying to get a piece of something, that it just kind of limits it and trends it more toward parity than anything else. Does that make any sense?
Makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, what
if Leon still had 2 more years in his deal and
maybe
Connor
that
still had
changes
3 more
things.
years in his deal, that would open up a window for a super team. But
yeah,
I don't think any team would be in that situation.
Well, the way I was looking at it from an Oilers perspective is yes, they obviously are going to pay Bouchard, McDavid, Draisaitl, but then they have guys like Ekholm, who's still on a decent deal, Hyman on a pretty good deal, and Nuge as well. They've managed to lock those guys in through this little bit of an era. I wondered if they would be able to get someone better than that, I guess.
It's pretty easy. Don't pay Bouch.
Shut up. We're not doing that.
Well, I was just going to say, and not to be that guy this week after seemingly everyone has piled on Bouchard this week, but I think mission critical for the Edmonton Oilers this summer is making sure you do whatever you can to have Evan Bouchard's deal not be 8 figures.
Yeah. Get him at, I would do anything under 10, and I think it's a win when you look at the way the cap's going.
But that's what it has to be. I think when you start to creep over that, I think you're starting to lose. At some point along that deal, there's a chance that he's closer to Nurse level impact than more than that.
Yeah, that's fair. When you look at the percentage of the cap when Nurse signed his deal, if you take that percentage and apply it to what it'll be in 2 seasons when the cap's up to 113, it's a $10.25 million player. So that, to me, you got to be under that number. So I agree with you. I agree with you on that. The other thing, too, just to give a take on the Oilers and the super team thing, maybe there's they sign Arvidsson, they sign Skinner, they spend $7.5 or $7 million on these 2 guys, and here we are, February 5th, going, they might need to add a top 6 winger. Maybe this front office just sits there and goes, you know what? Screw getting these middle of the road guys. Let's do a more Vegas model of $1 to $2 million guys in the bottom 6, and let's not spend 7 on an Arvidsson or a Skinner. Let's just go spend 9 on someone and know it's going to work.
I think that's the preferred method every time, but those guys rarely make it to market. And what you end up getting yourself into is signing guys that are closer to mid-tier guys in that pay range, and you end up regretting it. Yeah. You end up with Lindholms or Zadorovs, or pick another mid-range NHL player, not a star, that, this summer it'll end up being Brock Nelson, or pick, maybe he's a bad example because he's a little bit older, but think about what the free agent class looks like. You really have to avoid paying the mid-tier guy.
And that's a good point. Someone might pay Brock Besser, and this might sound dumb, but keep in mind where the cap's going. Someone might pay Brock Besser $8.5 million this summer. because
he's
they're sitting
already
there going, "We
making
have the money."
6-6. He's making 665, and he has a 40-goal season under his wing. Like, I'd say 8.5 is the minimum. I'm thinking with the cap increases, Brock Besser's in the low 9s.
Minnie will be happy to pay that.
They have all that dead money coming off. Last one, Frank, I wanted to throw your way. Defenseman with term, who maybe won't cost you all that much. What do you make of the Carson Soucy idea in Edmonton? Is there a player who just needs a change of scenery? Like, he's grizzled, he plays physical, but he's only 30. This isn't a 35-year-old.
The pride of Irma, Alberta. He is. So the situation is the Canucks sent out a memo earlier this week to the league letting them know that he is available. The issue, or not an issue, is Carson Soucy has a full no trade. Admittedly, he has not played very well this season. He understands that, but he does want to see if he can give it a week or so, another 10 days, maybe until Quinn Hughes is back, to see if he can ramp his game up and be a solution for the Canucks. So I think he's asked the Canucks for a little bit of time to find that, and it's his right with the no trade clause. When it comes to the Oilers, I don't think they have interest. I think at one point they did. It becomes a money game, and then if you're bringing in Soucy, you're probably not making any other acquisitions. And I think the way that he's played this year, they've wanted him to perform at a higher level if that was how they're going to take themselves out of the game.
Fair enough.
I have a really, really quick one, Frank. And I know we've basically gone through every position on the Oilers right now. But the one that is just like the top of conversation for so many people, especially after the Toronto game, was the goaltending. We've kind of spoke about it, that there's not really a market out there. Can you just give us some insight on what the Oilers may be thinking in this regard?
Yeah, I haven't gotten a sense from the Oilers yet as to whether or not that's a position that they'd like to improve on. My guess would be, having not asked the question, that given all the other things that we've talked about on the wish list, that it would probably be, a fourth or fifth option. But that said, I think this is a really unique year because there are so few teams actually looking for goaltending help that you might be able to add someone that could potentially provide some insurance or at least a good feeling for you and your team, most importantly, with a mid to late round pick. Like I think you could, just have someone take money off your books or whatever it might be. You could have a team this year that says, hey, we know we're not getting anything for him, but we're happy to move on and even just clear a roster spot to give another guy a chance to show what he can do this year to close out the year. This might be the year that you could truly find a bargain basement option for you that perhaps just makes you feel a little bit better when you're sleeping at night.
That video, then you need to be subscribed to the Oilers Nation YouTube. Podcasts, live shows, exclusive interviews, and analysis. Everything you need from your favorite voices at Oilers Nation. And you don't want to miss any of it, so hammer that subscribe button.